So what am I doing with this one?
Well, you can hold it, that follows it round, you see. So the mic's in there as well.
Oh, right, okay.
But the camera, so as we move around...
So...
It's pointing at you.
Of course.
So if you move it...
No.
So if you give it to Dan...
It's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's really good. Because I was somebody recorded one of the sessions I did the other day with a school, and he was using the one without that, and basically it was lots of head work. So I was conscious that I wasn't in the range of the camera.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a bit of a tricky one because you're kind of moving over there to talk to the teachers, and I'm thinking, oh no, we're off the range.
Nice.
Whereas the beauty of that is, even if you're right on the other side of the classroom, the mic still picks up the sound. The camera.
Right, I see. Yeah.
So you have this around your neck and you...
Hey, is that going to stay there then?
Yeah, is that okay?
So you could sit there, and as long as you've got the conch, the camera will follow you around.
Yeah.
So
so with the presentation, if you're okay, we'll put the presentation as a separate thing. Yeah, so you'll have the video of you talking about it, and then the presentation for people to.
Okay, cool.
So it doesn't matter if it's not pointing at the
Put it around your neck.
Yeah. Brilliant.
You
so
left school one day.
Did I leave? Sorry.
You left school.
Have I left school? What have I done?
I thought you were.
Well, it's Surrey School. Surrey School Support Service. No. I used to be assistant head of sixth form and head of ICT. Yeah. But I'm an LA advisor now.
Right, I'm with you.
So, yeah. But Surrey outsourced their Surrey outsourced their local authority services. Basically.
To Babcock.
Yeah, about 5 years, no longer than 10 years ago. So should we start? Do you think? Okay, fantastic. Yeah, let's get it. Yeah, absolutely. So what do I have to do? Do I have to record press anything?
No.
Let's go in. Okay, fantastic. Do you need to introduce anything, or shall I just go?
No, I think we know who you are.
Okay, brilliant. Welcome to our session today. Myself, Dan Bowen, and Dave Smith are school improvement advisors based in Surrey and Havering, and we're going to talk today about the partnerships we've had in Surrey schools and Havering schools and abroad, and how that's impacted on teaching and learning in our schools itself. There's a nice little quote at the beginning here saying about, on our own we can go quickly, but together we can go far, and we think that's a mantra for any of the international trips that we've been on. It's a proverb, obviously from some African country, I think, but I've attributed it to Tom Jones there because we thought we needed to get the international links going straight away as well, but also from home. Yeah. So you know, in the current kind of climate with PISA league tables and pressures in the English education system, it was really good at that point when we did a recent visit to Sweden, when Michael Gove was talking about free schools, and he was talking about league tables and literacy, and we actually hit the ground running there at the right time to see what was going on, and we'll allude to some of the things that we picked up there. So what we're going to talk about today are the lessons shared, how we use social networking, the links we kind of maintained, and how all this e-twinning and international global communication between things like MirandaNet, online forums, and actually simple things like Facebook, actually transforming the relationships we have with countries abroad and schools abroad and kids and staff. And we'll also talk about some of the other projects that we can get involved in if you were interested to go down that route later on. So when we initially visited Sweden, we visited Sandviken commune, and we looked at all phases of education right through, and we interviewed all the head teachers, we spoke to students, we watched lessons. It was like a super duper Ofsted trip. You're looking at everything basically. We spoke to everybody. We spoke to and they were very, very welcoming, and we spoke to the local leaders of education, we spoke to government officials, and it was absolutely fantastic, and it was very well set up. So there was a lot of we took 25 teachers with us, and we're going to look at the one-to-one project they did, and writing to read, and also the free school debate. So this is an interesting slide. If you just have a look at that, it's our attitude to risk. We took this on the
Vocational education.
yeah, absolutely. That was a very young group. I think they were a reception group actually, and we were looking at best practice. And for me, what blew my mind was their attitude to risk, which was absolutely superb in one respect, and actually scary as heck in another respect. What you can't see on that picture actually is that at the bottom left, this little boy was hammering the diggings out of a 6-inch nail with a proper hammer, absolutely smashing the heck out of it, and he was absolutely brilliant. And you know, the teacher with her foot on a piece of wood was absolutely sublime. But actually, it was fantastic because it was showing, you know, it was actually illustrating how conscious we are in the UK about health and safety. And actually, it wasn't a bad thing, you know, to see this and for teachers to see this and think, okay. So if you go to the next slide, there's another nice little picture where they were having massage at the beginning of lessons, and actually looking at the teachers' faces and our faces. I think it was very powerful to see that actually in our pressurised exam system, exam results orientated systems we have, we're missing quite an important part of education, and we're missing out the child. And you know, the way that we've moved so far away from sitting down, comforting children, actually getting, and I'm not saying that the teachers out there go and massage all of the kids, but actually they get the kids to massage each other. I know some secondaries and some primaries are investigating all of this and the kind of holistic education to do with Reiki and kind of yoga and all of that kind of stuff to get kids on where they're learning. But it did, the penny was starting to drop for a lot of us that we've kind of moved on.
Dan, what age do they start school in Sweden now? I know it used to be 7 before they started.
Yeah.
How old are they now?
It's still 7, I think. Yeah. They have the free school thing, which I'll come on to in a minute, is quite interesting as well with that choice. And actually, there was lots of questions that it asked us. You know, we were having thinking about the actual choice that the students get as well. So it's very much kind of they go into it later, and actually, in some respects, they were quite far behind, but then they caught up much more quickly.
I mean, Swedish adults are just as great as English adults.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, we watched one. Without spoiling the Thunder of Dave's bit, where we looked at a video conference. Well, we looked at a video conference, but they were videoing and we were watching them doing sales pitches, and their English was absolutely phenomenal. And it was actually embarrassing for us to sit there thinking, actually, their English was better than some of the British secondary school pupils who were pitching ideas when we watched business studies lessons. But you know, there was this big gulf and attitude to risk, which was very interesting. One quick anecdote was when I asked the head teacher, because there was lots of snow and there was kids jumping around in the snow and going mad, and I asked the head teacher and I said, what happens if they fall? And she said, oh, we put it in the accident book. And then I said, okay, so what happens if they break their arm? Oh, we put it in the accident book. And then I said, I'm not trying to be funny, but what happens if they die? If they literally break their neck or off? There's serious big bits of snow and ice. So what happens if that? Oh, we put it in that accident book. And I'm like, the attitude to risk, and I'm not kidding you, isn't it? It was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And so it was illustrating to us that the family is a bigger connected unit to do with education in Sweden, and it was bringing home. I think that was one of the main things that my colleagues from Surrey took away from it, was that attitude to risk and the family element to it all. So the next slide, there's another image of one of the programs they're using, which we'll go on to in a little bit. But again, you know, they were using technology from a very, very young age there. And one of the programs they do is called Writing to Read, which we'll allude to in a second. Well, that was one of the boys in the process. So the one-to-one project, they were giving out, basically, they were pushing through across the entire area, one computing per child. It's as simple as that, really. And they heavily invested in it. They heavily invested in the infrastructure. They heavily invested in the tools and technologies to support these things centrally, almost like a community-wide managed service, like a super LA like a model for it all. And they were really pushing this. It was quite interesting, though the VLE element to it, I think we were further on with the learning platform development and the pedagogical use of the technology, one-to-one computing. But they were very keen for it, and this project was kind of very well acclaimed. They were doing studies on the impact. This was very interesting, and there was a few comparisons that we made when we were there, and Dave might allude to some of it later, but they basically read by writing. So they learn to read by writing on Word. They type and various different programs to speak to them, and actually text-to-speech programs that they use, and they feed back that way. But it means they can write a lot. They were writing lots and lots and reading it back, and they get very good. But the development of physical motor skills, holding pens and things, was very quite weak. I had an iPad app where you can trace phonic, cursive lettering, and they really struggled with that because they were used to the fonts on a computer. So it was very positive impact, but there were gaps that we could see. Whether you think they were bad gaps or good gaps is your own link. And then the other element, which was quite interesting, was their attitude to special educational needs. There was a lot of sensory areas centrally at the local authority level where the students would go to. Amazing sensory areas which are timetabled in for all kids, for all different ages, and adults could use it as well. And it was really, really interesting, and they were very nurturing in their acceptance of students with special educational needs, and very much about promoting their independence. And actually, the other interesting was the forest learning projects that they had, going out to maths lessons outside. But what I found from a secondary point of view, that I left them open to very, very flaky standards. To a certain extent, I know you recorded out, but for somebody from Sweden watching this, I'm sorry, but there was they were very much after and asking us about Ofsted, even though our education system over here, we feel as if we kind of getting a bit under pressure with Ofsted. They needed something to standardise. That was their opinion to us, and they were saying, we love your Ofsted model because if you're a good teacher over there, you are an outstanding teacher over there because you're taking kids and different experiences. Let's do the maths in the forestry. Let's take apart some bits of wood and trees and measure things, and it was fantastic. But if you were a poor teacher over there, and we saw some average lessons, normal everyday lessons, that actually the kids are getting on with things, and if you weren't that inspirational, you just looking at textbooks, looking online, and it was very passive. So they were conscious of that, and they actually pushed very much for wanting the Ofsted kind of style of things. And I think the next bit moves across to my colleague, Mr. Smith, and if I move the screen thing.
Thanks very much, Dan. Yeah, very interesting, and similar sort of thoughts from the schools that we visited as well. And this whole idea of risk was quite amazing. Yeah, we've had some ongoing work actually on the back of this project, which has been one of the great successes of the partnership working between Sandviken and Surrey schools and Havering schools. And that Sandviken teachers, as part of a group of 485 delegates from Sweden, came last year to the BET show to have a look at technology in action. If you look around the BET show last year and this year, you'll see the amount of stands that have actually got Swedish staff on them. You'll see them actually with Swedish t-shirts and things like that. And it's a big market because of the central procurement models that they have in Sweden that are very different to what we have tending to have in England at the moment. But as part of that, the authority from Sandviken actually came to look at visualizer technology. We've been doing a lot of work in Havering in particular in developing that over years, and as a result the school went back and they bought 40 visualizers, which they then rolled out to schools across their authority. And as well as this, we've been developing the use of video conferencing via Skype and FaceTime between Havering and Sandviken in particular. So some of our schools where they're Apple and they've got iPads have liked to do that. They've been trying that out and working on that, as well as the Skype side of things. And we've been using a visualizer. This was with support from Elmo, a visualizer company. We've been using an Elmo visualizer to actually Connect Up and video conference. So something I've been sharing this week is some of the outcomes of that project, showing where children have actually been using it for things like maths, and sharing their ideas there, and class councils across the authorities. So that's been quite successful actually. Well, one of the other things is maintaining the links, and the social networking has given us the tools that perhaps we wouldn't have had a few years ago. I took a group to Spain in 2006, and we had a really good time in Spain and learned a lot in that visit. However, when it came to developing the ongoing links, which we really wanted to do, it just died. And we tried email and it didn't really come off. There was a language barrier. There wasn't a way really to make it easy for everyone to access and put things and post things up quickly. And so that was a barrier to building the links. Unlike this. So, you know, I think you can see what we've mentioned. People from Sandviken have come over to here, and even the one of the heads of service was here yesterday presenting at an event. But as part of this, actually, schools are sharing school-to-school practice. So it's not just Dan and I, it's actually our schools, it's individuals within those schools, and it's pupils as well. So we've grown it beyond what might have been a traditional Teachers International Professional Development trip to be something a bit more than that. But you know, there are a whole range of other tools now that you could be using. So it could be Pinterest that you might be using there, and other aspects that we could get schools to start to add additional content into there. So Twitter conversations, as Dan's mentioned, we've got blogs. There was a blog going on in the visit. Individual teachers and teaching assistants in the visit had their own blogs, so they were blogging themselves as well. So although we had to write reports, didn't we, Dan? Which was a big bit of work for us every day. As well as that, while we were writing the reports, people were actually putting that information out. But even in the 2 years since then, Twitter has you know, grown, as we know, out of, you know, all proportion to what it would have been even 2 years ago. Now I think if we went back and did it again, there'd be even more of that, wouldn't there? Okay. And do you know, is that, you know, reporting live and pushing stuff out live during the visits to the schools may even make that visit even more engaging. So a few things there that came from that. And then we've got follow-up visits. So we have Swedish schools who came to England and visited schools in our authority. They did ask to go to, you know, to Dan's as well. But unfortunately, they were tight on time and can only come to our side of London. So it's not as if it was Havering, not at all, because the Surrey schools were interested in this as well, and they come over and bet 2012. I visited Sandviken myself last year with a group of teachers and ICT business associates to promote ICT, and that's continuing the links there. As you can see the picture there, we were having a meal as part of the discussion time, of course. Beautiful place over there to visit, and totally recommend it. So, on the back of that, you know, I think we've had the TIBPD programme. Unfortunately, the budgets are not there for that anymore, which is a real shame, because that was doing some great work, and it's certainly inspired our schools as well as I know your schools, Dan. You know, they went to IKEA and bought lots of stuff to put to spruce up their classrooms. I'm not joking, they did. Yeah. They did afterwards. Yeah, you had all sorts of like IKEA curtains and things in classrooms afterwards. But it's the things like the British Council's e-twinning programme, the Connected Classrooms programme, and £1,500 funding there from the Connected Classrooms programme. Actually, the British Council will put that money in, and they'll support you with a link, and they've got some favoured countries around the world. Well, they do that bit of work for you. You can spend it on ICT if you want to, or it could just be about developing research. It could be about developing, you know, sharing of practice from UK to another country in the world, Sierra Leone, for example, or from Sierra Leone to UK. So it's about that. So it's worthwhile getting involved in those British Council projects. There's a lot of EU funding out there still, and I think we really do in this country, from what I noticed of talking to our schools, we don't take as much of advantage as that as my colleagues, you know, in other trips. I took a group to, I was part of a group in Milan 3 years ago. In fact, only just half an hour ago this afternoon, I met a lady who led that trip in Milan, and she's constantly getting out on visits across Europe to other countries to see what's available, to see what's going on in those education systems, and to learn and share practice. So I think something we can learn about a vote in 2017, if there's going to be one. Think about it. If we decide to pull out of the European Union, we could end up pulling out of those programs as well. But then there's the World e-Citizens program from MirandaNet, and there's connecting over 80 countries. A really good you know, resource for education collaboration, and alongside the other things that was mentioned. And you know, from this slide, topics such as responsible citizenship, mutual respect, combating social injustice and conflict prevention and resolution. So it's really good to get onto the worldecitizens.net as well and do some, get involved with that program. I think it's what they said, and some of the teachers actually got some feedback from them here, is that a Year 5 teacher here said that it opened my eyes to education in its broader sense. In some aspects, we've forgotten about the nurturing element of school in the UK. Dan picked that up earlier in the session here, and I think that was one of the things that really hit me and made me think, you know what? I wish we could have many more elements of that system in our system here in the UK. Yeah, Dan, you're exactly right about where are the levels of pupil achievement there. There were some sensitive questions, and we had to hold our groups back from asking too many of those, didn't we? Because they don't assess until later. I think the national testing doesn't start until 12 in Sweden, and there were some changes afoot there, and certainly the inspection regime was very different to what we have here. But however, there are some elements there which were a lot richer, and certainly in terms of the nurturing of the students. And it says here, the English used by the 16-year-old students to present to us was exemplary. I wish our students were as good at a second language. And that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay? The world operating language, we operate in English. And I know that when I went myself to Milan, the operating language for that actual week was English in Italy. Okay? So you had to be able to have a certain level of English to do that. However, we need to be nurturing students and pupils who are developing these skills so they can get out in the world and engage with other languages in other places as well. So I think that was something that was really good from there. And overall conclusions really is that there are tremendous positives when looking at ICT and general practice abroad. We didn't know, there was differences, weren't there, Dan, in terms of the approach. The rollout of the one-to-one project, one device for every student, with effective managed wireless across the whole local authority, with training that supported it. And I'm wondering at the moment, we're moving away from that. We're allowing a lot of autonomy, which is really good, because that's on innovation, but are we losing the aspect of really good, reliable provision for all our children, regardless of where they are? And certainly, I don't know what you think, Dan, but from my experience of visiting schools, it's very, very up and down here in terms of what the provision is for children. So actually, there are some real positives that came out of that model, there. Again, it's looking for these European Union bursaries to save costs, network online and use social networking to maintain links and maximise value. And I think that trips allow for reflection on your own good practice. And certainly we had ongoing conversation throughout that week, didn't we, throughout the groups. And it was lovely because it was two local authorities mixing people up and they were sharing their ideas. And it shows outstanding continuing professional development and practice, if done well, can have real impact. And I think this was really good. And I think, Dan, that was one of the great things. And actually going together as two groups added richness to it, and ongoing that's done so as well, hasn't it? Do you have any other points to add in there, Dan? From that?
One thing we kind of missed out on, do you know? So we did.
Yeah, go ahead. Go on.
The only one thing we missed out on, which people might be interested in, was the free school debate, because we were there right when Michael Gove was suggesting that for this country, and just for what it's worth, what we found out there was that actually schools were becoming quite competitive. And one school at that point was giving out devices to the kids to get them in, putting buses on to get them in, and there were kids who were moving very far out to their graphic area where they live, out to their communities. And what the teachers are saying to us is that that you could see from hopefully what we've alluded to today, that there was a very nurturing element and family orientated element to Sweden, and they felt that it was possibly pushing that quite far because students were moving out, to go to a free school down the road which was offering a laptop, an iPad, the latest bit of kit. So there was that was quite an interesting debate for us to. And then when we came back, it was very much free schools, over here, and we, alarm bells were kind of ringing because they kind of, even though they put up quite highly, they were debatable when we were there.
Interesting, because the one they had at Sandvika was part of the Sandvik company, tool making company. Was that they were the ones who were sponsoring it, so it was more like a sponsored academy in a way, and they were having a longer day there, and they were, you know, like you're saying, providing extra equipment and bursaries, and it was more like an apprenticeship, an early apprenticeship, so a bit different, more perhaps in a way something like a UTC, University Technical College, and that was the sort of model that we're at. But having spoken to people there since and having visited as well, in the preschools, my friend over there, he when his children were in preschool, so although we say they start at 7, the preschools start very early, and we visited preschools, didn't we? And there were children there from very, very little young age. You've got preschools as well, where parents are setting up their own ones. So the friend over there, he actually, with a group of 12 other parents, set up a preschool because they wanted to focus on healthy lifestyles and didn't feel so much that that was the case. Although I have to say, with free school dinners for every child in every class up to the age of 19, was it 18, 19? That, you know, it was interesting to see that, and actually I thought the school dinners were as healthy as any I've ever seen. So that was interesting as well. So a bit of a different debate. Local authority is still pretty much king there, I think, in terms of it certainly was there in terms of supporting the practice and the provision, central procurement and buy-in from an ICT perspective, and they were very well respected. So there they had a team of 4 local authority advisors. I can't remember how many schools across Sandviken commune, Dan, I'm not sure how many there are altogether. 50 or something like that, 600, yeah? But actually they're providing centralised training or going out and doing training. They even do things like managing the school's websites as well. So they'll develop the school's websites and helping them with that. But you're right, in terms of the learning platforms, they were not developing at the pace they are here, and we didn't really see many interactive whiteboards. In fact, I think they were waiting for first ones there, weren't they? And then the other thing there was that I mean, they did have effective wireless, and that was, you know, very, very high intensity of wireless as well.
That sort of raises 3 questions in my head, Dave. One you mentioned VLEs, interactive whiteboards, lack of. Is that necessarily a bad thing? In my book, that's quite a good thing. But good wireless Wi-Fi structure, were students bringing their own devices, or was it on cards?
No, they were given devices, so that meant that they had their own the device they had in school, and obviously they're waiting for that to be rolled out. So if they weren't in the first phase, they were waiting for the next phase to come through. So no, I didn't. Did you see BYOD, Dan?
No, they were heavily personalising the devices.
Yeah, they were.
So they had stickers. They
oh yeah.
They had them. It was a ubiquitous piece of kit.
No filter.
They felt they had ownership. It wasn't they just popping out the HP laptop. They had their Metallica stickers over them, and they actually, you know, it was like their pencil case essentially, which is quite nice. But it wasn't a kit. Because they had swap out schemes, didn't they? So if the laptop would break down and they reinstalls, that was centrally managed.
And no filtering, no internet filtering, just access. They can go to anything. So that was more about the responsible use. So in developing that,
they've got no fencing or gates either. On
no, that's very interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Same in Denmark. I was talking to a Danish minister at a conference last year, and this is not the internet. The sky hasn't fallen in.
Yeah.
I think this all goes back to this thing that Dan was saying about risk as well, and you'd say that you know, when you go there, you can walk straight into a school, can't you, Dan? So you could walk into a classroom. You know, there aren't the security cameras and the doors and the buzzers and the, you know, if you don't sign the I can't remember signing a signing in book in any of the schools actually. So it's very different, and building on what you're saying as well, in the playground of that school we went, and that one you mentioned it, the children were out there, and Dan's asking the question, you know, what happens if you fall over, fill in the book, what happens if you break it, fill in the book, okay? But I don't know if you remember, there was a man walking through the school grounds with a bag of shopping. Do you remember that? We're looking at each other, and I think we said to the children, who's that man? Oh, he lives over there. He said, but this is your school playground. He said, yeah, he lives over there and the shops are over there. And he walks through here on the way home. It's like, oh, it's no problem, was it? No. But then they were, and the other thing was as well, where were the teachers on duty? Because actually they say to us, well, if there's a problem, they come and get us, don't they? And they come and get us. We're in the staff room over there, they're out here, they come and get us.
Yeah. What size was, how many children in the school?
Oh, it depended really, didn't it?
Which school, they were very similar sizes.
Yeah, really, primary. So
the secondaries were quite large.
Yeah.
And they were very they almost look like building schools, future schools. They all look very well kept. They were very new buildings.
Like IKEA, didn't they?
Yeah, I know. I'm just going to say.
Like they're built by IKEA. They do look like they're built like IKEA by IKEA.
And they look quite
modular,
clean and tidy, and whereas you can go into some secondaries in the UK in older buildings, which sometimes aren't the best learning environments, but it's very clean and tidy.
Yeah.
Balance of curriculum subjects.
Yeah, balance. Yeah, good.
But there was an issue at secondary, wasn't there? Because they could choose things, and there was one lovely anecdote where one of the boys said they basically developed their own timetable, and he was doing his GCSE kind of age he was, so he's about 15, 16, and he kind of said, I'm going to do, so they sat down with the teacher, he said, I'll do maths. I don't particularly like maths, so I'm going to do it at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. And the teacher said, well fine, you can do that, but I'm not around to support you. So his maths do himself. And there was there was a bit of a detriment to some of the creative curriculum, because we watched a history lesson, or it might have even been a science lesson, or the history science lesson, and they asked us to present about an English scientist or a Welsh scientist. But I think the curriculum was an issue. I think not an issue, but it was very different to what we would imagine as a structured curriculum.
Yeah.
They would select different things. They weren't assessed, so the teacher would assess them on
biggest difference.
Whatever they fancied really. And if I was a teacher and I had a particular focus on physics, I might spend ages talking about physics and miss out big chunks of quite important biology, for example. But I'm only then testing them on physics. So actually, they can still get 100% in science or 80%. It's very interesting form assessment.
I recently looked at the Swedish curriculum for ICT, and it's even shorter than the one we've got coming up. Yeah, I think I was only about 8 lines, I think. Yeah, so they keep beating us. But actually, it's quite interesting in that respect as well. So it was a balance, but Dan's right. There's a lot of flexibility, I felt there was less pressure on. I don't think you can sack teachers unless they do something really badly in Sweden. It seemed to come across that. Yeah, definitely. Performance management was different. It was. I'm not sure how rigorous that was in that respect as well.
But they were obviously nurtured. The staff were nurtured. There were plenty of breaks for staff. It's very interesting. And from a case of the impact, they were taking home a lot of ideas, and some of our schools in Surrey have picked up on the relationship between students and trying to soften things on the corners and actually value staff a little bit more. Because in Sweden they seem to always be doing a thing called fika time. Fika time. Yeah, you have a break and a cup of tea. So you talk for about 10 minutes and they're right, we need fika time now. We've talked to this has been a bit exhausting. We now need fika time. And there was lots of fika time, and we left with
I'm breathing in now. Yeah. But absolutely.
That's a new thing for Miranda Day.
And if you go to IKEA, they do serve the buns that we had over there, Dan. Did you know that?
Heavily
pastry.
We had to
buns.
pay excess to go back on flights, I think, because of the weight.
But it was fantastic, wasn't it? I think compared to the other trips I've been to, that was just the best one. I think I came back with, learning a lot, and it was about these other aspects that we mentioned that were so crucial in terms of the way that the schooling system actually works. And it's probably the closest I've ever come to thinking that's the type of schooling system I'd like to work in. There are some things I'd like to see maybe change there, but I think generally I felt very comfortable there.
A better question maybe is, what kind of system would I like my children to be in?
I think that's, and John, for me, for a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, I would like my children to be in that system. And my friend there, Sven, he's got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I watch what they're doing. And it's very interesting. His daughter, she walks to school. It's 800 metres from where they live. She walks to school, and she has a key and lets herself in the afternoon, does homework, prepares herself a snack, and has a friend round until her mum and dad come home later. Now think about that here. Probably be in the Sun or the Daily Mirror or something, wouldn't it, really?
That's quite an interesting point, the sort of school you'd like for your children. Because in an earlier session this afternoon, one of the speakers said, they were considering bring your own device, bring your own technology, but one of the drivers against it was the parents didn't want any of this stuff. Now, where are the parents getting these sort of negative reactions from technology? I mean, one suspects it's
Do you know, Theo, I'm doing an e-safety session next week in a school, and I've got 5 emails, and it's a very affluent area. I won't mention where it is, and if anyone's watching, they'll know where I'm from. But it's not in Havering. But I've received 5 emails from here today, and it's more than I've ever received, with almost like a dossier of questions from the parents of what they want to know. You know, issues with Instagram and things like this. You know, and you're looking at this and thinking, wow, and I'm going to have to tweak my presentation from what I normally do to answer some and address some of these issues. And they very much are focusing on the negative rather than the positive elements. And only the start of this term, my daughter, we've got her a Kindle, and we've got a new head in the school, small primary school, and we've put together a Kindle, you know, an e-reader use agreement, and now she's allowed to take that in. She's been using that, and some other children are starting to bring that in, and actually the head's now thinking about using that to focus on supporting the learning needs of some of the other children. So if you flip it and think it could be that we're leading some of the practice by getting some, you know, parents and pupils showing that, but on the flip side, you can get the negativity aspect, which I'm facing with this e-safety session, which is very much focusing on negative.
But every e-safety session I've seen causes people to panic.
It does, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we're not
You didn't come to ours.
I think one of the EU Kids Online reports everybody should be reading when it came out in October. Sort of give, you know, it's a meta study of 33 countries. It actually breaks down sort of different behaviours. But there is a consistency to it, and it sort of dispels the myth of the Daily Mail and all the other nonsense that's going about. And the BBC are just as guilty. They're jumping on that bandwagon. You know,
I think a lot of that's to do with all newspapers in particular need to sell now. They're less and less ethical about how they do it.
But the other thing that's fueling that as well is the fact that the technology has appeared, and you know, for example, in the football community, you look at some of the football players are actually the youngsters really, and a lot of the behaviour that some of the social networks mimic is stuff that people have learned over time, like how to make friends. You know, you normally make friends in a very different way, and now they're making friends, and that's all the semantic about friends. You know, rather than the Twitter semantics of followers. You know, that kind of thing. You know, is a big issue, and I think we are starting to address it. And I think with the COP and the new offset inspection guidance is quite good actually. It's in a lot of detail about systems in place, but you know the way they're communicating is different. But just to kind of reiterate on the conclusions here, that the way we do social networking completely changed the dynamic of this trip, and actually the way we do it again would be to add things like Dave said about Pinterest, taking photos of classroom displays, taking photos of good practice, and categorising things, because there's some amazing practice going on. Absolutely.
Having spent the weekend making mud kitchen units for a nursery class, where risk is exactly like so the kids basically have this whole area outside where they can because Vanessa, my wife, would love to go and live in Scandinavia anywhere actually, because the kinds of activities the kids basically spend all of their time outside, doesn't matter what the weather is, and over there it's -10 when they're outside. And it's that, so we need to address that risk, and I feel definitely with the way that we're dealing with e-safety in a certain way, but I'm not convinced that we're actually talking about the positives. Everyone can have scare stories, but are we giving enough positives in the use?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you compare it with we're teaching a road safety lesson, imagine teaching when all we talk about is the injuries in crashes and But back to the international thing, I think what's been quite an eye-opener, and very sort of positive talk, chaps. I think I think one of the great problems with the education system, certainly in England, probably even in Scotland, but not so much so there, is that teachers are so, everything's inward looking. They look into the classroom, the departments are inward looking, the schools are inward looking, and rarely, obviously there are exceptions, look to school down the road, or even more importantly, what's going on in other countries. And I was very disappointed a couple of weeks ago. There was a UK EdChat topic, and the choice was between
if it's tested and inspected, people are going to move towards that, aren't they? They're going to be driven by that, and that's a shame, isn't it?
I need to stop.
Anecdotal thing.
No, go on.
To reinforce the
power
of these. But in 2000, I took a group of teachers from a school in which I'd worked to Bulgaria. Katya Toneva was still professor at University of Varna, and she organised some visits, and we went to one school, which was the High School for Mathematics, and we went there, and it was a tired old building. It looked as if it needed renovation. The computer suites were fairly minimal. They got all kinds of bits of kit cobbled together. Kids had to share computers and so on. And the teacher got her kids to present to us computer projects that they'd done to illustrate a topic in maths in which they were interested. And one chap showed how he'd set up a program to demonstrate nets. I'm not a mathematician. I'd seen them, but it's where you have a rectangle and you twist it and you turn it and you can measure everything there. And this kid ran the program and the shapes changed and he could stop it and it would demonstrate the angles and everything else. And he explained how he'd done it and what the problem was that he was going to solve in English. 14 years old. And one of my colleagues worked in the maths department of the school, and he said, my God, he said, my 18-year-old struggle to understand the concept of nets. They couldn't explain it in English of the quality of him. And Phil struggled to teach nets, and yet here it was done. And there were a number of other examples like that on the visit that just changed the way that the English teachers thought about things and the way they did it. Quite interesting.
Yes, I need to bring it to a close because we've got another session starting soon. But I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I've only been out of the room for an hour the whole time, and I had a meeting. I had to go, I'm sorry. But from what I picked up, you obviously had a trip that made you think. And that's the very exciting thing. And one of the things that we're doing is different, we're calling them meshes, getting people involved in a map of the kinds, what I'm thinking of is the headline would be exchange visits. And we would have a map of what has been learnt and try and get the evidence. We're doing this on all sorts of topics. And the idea would be that you could use that evidence to get some more funding, to get it organised. So if you're interested in that, I'd be delighted. And I was pleased you mentioned World E-Citizens as well, because we do have certificates, as you will know, for the children. And if you've got any work that you'd like to link onto the MirandaNet site, we can send you the PDF, or you can give them to the children. Sometimes it does motivate them, doesn't it? It does motivate them to do these things, and they feel that they've done something. We've got a lot of countries, I mean China, Russia, all sorts of things. So if you'd like some of those, we'd be delighted. And I'm sorry we couldn't give you a bigger audience, but it is nearly finished, and the quality of discussion was just as good as we've had all the way through. Well, yes, if you do that, I want to award them both for their presentation. You prefer Dave, don't you?
Yeah, but that's fine.
I've put David. I'll give you another one. That's your senior fellowship, which you've already got a fellowship, and that's your fellowship.
Oh, thank you.
So there we are, and we'd like. This is on condition we get all your stuff.
Oh, of course, yeah, we send the reports through.
Yeah, we don't do things for nothing.
Okay, guys. I know the World E-Citizens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Great idea.
Okay then.
And have you made?
Yeah.
Lots of claps. Lots of claps. Have you done websites of the work or anything like that?
Yeah, I've got a blog which we ran when we were there.
Yeah.
And we've got a Facebook groups.
Well, if you could put it together and give us links or give us stuff to put up.
Yeah,
Lawrence is Katya still here? No, she's not. But yeah, she's yes. We'd love it for that, and obviously what you can give us for teachers about what you've learned.
Yes, absolutely.
But also we've got workshops coming up on this idea of the mesh. The idea is to get power back to the profession.
Yes.
And it's the Cochrane, the Cochrane Review has got a lot of this stuff, and for medical people, and we've got a lot of international support for it, partly because, as you know, our sites all disappeared when the government changed, and we're trying to get ownership of it in a different way.
Also, yes, yeah.
I'll take it off.
So, if everybody wants a coffee break.
We do.
Come through.
Okay. Especially for primary, because you can start to link two cameras together as well. You've got wireless.
That'd be really good. You just run out from iPods. That's what you
Yeah. We've got that speakers that runs on the iPod, so it encrypts the video on the iPod. Because that was the problem before. Yeah, one of the problems before is if I do my lesson here and give it to you to do next lesson, you could really watch my lesson before. Well, now you can't.
If we get him to run the session,
Yeah.
I'll leave the maybe we'll get to promote it out and share that with his mums and Bowen.
And you, yeah.
Belinda, you're going to join us for this, weren't you? And Dowie, if you can join us, this is looking at how we might use the cameras in a project. Roger's going to join us as well.
Do you mind if I grab my sandwich while I'm...
Yeah, sure, yeah.